You have this drive and passion to give back. Where did that start for you?
It was just within my soul that I had to help other people. And it was never a chore and it was never an effort. It was always, oh, there's somebody who needs help, let's do it. Yeah, 100% to this day when you do it, you do get an amazing feeling when you can take somebody from a darker place into a bit of light. So yeah, there's the benefit to yourself of how it makes you feel, but it just has always felt like the right thing to do to help people.
You're doing a lot of stuff, and what really stuck out to me in reading your book, How to Ask for Money, and watching a number of your interviews, is you have this drive and passion to give back. Where did that start for you? How did you develop that?
From a really young age, that was, we grew up in, a fairly impoverished area in north of Scotland. And my mentor from a really young age would have been my great auntie Molly. She kind of grew up in the war, and I think she was born in like the 20s. And she always taught me that helping other people was more important than anything else. So every day you live, you should be looking for the opportunities to help people and always looking out with that eyes open to see who's out there and who needs you. So it really from the youngest memories I have, it is helping other people first. So I guess from then.
Okay. And it made you feel a certain way? Is that why you kind of ran in that direction? You felt better doing it?
And then, I guess everybody may react differently to it, but I felt that it was just within my soul that I had to help other people. I didn't really see any other, and it was never a chore and it was never an effort. It was always, oh, there's somebody who needs help, let's do it. And yeah, 100% to this day, when you do it, you do get that selfishly, you get an amazing feeling when you can take somebody from a darker place into a bit of light. So yeah, there is the benefit to yourself of how it makes you feel, but it just has always felt like the right thing to do to help people.
Yeah. And I've got friends that are recovering alcoholics, and they've gone through the AA 12-step, program. And the one thing that they all say is that the foundation for how it works is helping others. And when they don't do that is when they slip back into addiction.
Yeah. And I think it goes with anything, even during the COVID period, I think everybody was in we could sink into, depressions and real like slumps for a while. And I would always, people say, how do you feel better? You should just look for somebody who needs help, go do something, go and bring some groceries to someone, or call somebody who needs help, go to the care homes and see who needs a bit of comfort or a bit of support. Or there's always these little things. And I think anytime that you're feeling that bit of lowness, helping someone else. So I fully understand why programs like AA have helping people as part of their program, because especially if you're helping someone that's problem might be greater than your own, it takes away from your problem. If you're looking at something that you've got these things going on in your house that might seem super trivial, but they could build up into something huge if you're focused on that constantly. So helping other people takes your mind away from those things that are in your world.
Yeah, that's so great. It's not good to dwell on things too long, at least the wrong things, I would say.
And it keeps busy as well. And I think for me, there was a big list you've just read out there. I'm like, well, I can't remember half those things that I'm doing, but waking up every single day with those things to do and a constant stream of things keeps your mind from wandering into anything else.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, maybe we can hit it right now. I'm kind of impressed with everything that you do and how you keep it going. So if I remember right, you and your husband have 4 different businesses. You've got all these different causes that you're involved with. When you wake up and you have a list, what are your tips for the listeners around how to organize this stuff and keep everything moving forward and being effective in a number of things?
Yeah. And I think it's, between Dean and I, we have our strengths and our weaknesses for sure. So we delegate a lot between us. Dean likes to, the saying, eat the frog. He goes straight for the hard stuff first. He'll, the most difficult job that's on the list, he'll go and start tackling straight away. I like to clear up all the smaller little things and then get onto a big thing and then go through the little things. So we get up, generally between 5 and 6 o'clock, we get up. We've got three kids who are at various stages in life. So 12, 7, and 1. So they've all got different needs, and we'll deal with that, get to school, whatever it might be, and then tackle the the work. I think it's really important to avoid the procrastination side of things, or get sucked into looking at your phone or, social media or other things that might distract you. And that's not to say that you can't have these things, but just have them at specific moments. Dean and I will always finish our day at around about 7:30, and we have a cup of tea and we sit and we analyze how the day has gone and talk to each other and have our little moment there. Sunday breakfast time is a no work time where we'll sit and just talk about the week and how things are with each other, and our own mind, body and soul conversations. So we have, and it's definitely not rigid. I know a lot of people that do work very, very rigid programs that are every hour, every minute is accounted for. We don't like that, because the way that our world is, we could get a phone call right now saying a disaster struck somewhere and Dean has to go away. So we have to be very liquid in what we're doing. But as a general day-to-day, we can be really focused on the areas and have the time separated for each individual thing. And we've got a group of people around us who are amazing, and that even goes to the kids. The kids just work with us really, really well. So we've managed to build that. Not always easy, don't get me wrong, but it works.
Yeah, I operate the same way. I don't like having a rigid schedule because things came up, but I have a number of areas in my life where I'm trying to create value, and I just want to make sure that I'm moving the bar in all of those areas effectively. And some days I can do anything and everything, and I'm looking for more stuff, and I've got tons of energy. Other days, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe everything that's going on. Do you have days like that too?
Oh yeah, 100%. We got back. So we've been going through our green card process for living in the States permanently. And it's been a long process because we started it in the middle of COVID when embassies were shut and everything was really, really difficult to navigate. So we finally got to the end of that. And yesterday, we got back on Saturday into the US, and that was our, moment of we're official immigrants to the US. And then Monday was my first day of really getting down into work, and I was excited for it. And then I was like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm so jet lagged, and I really just want to sit and do absolutely nothing. But what I really done then was I set myself some goals and said, right, when you achieve that, then you can just finish for the day and have an early close. So I done that and then get back into it today. I'm still not quite sure what day it is, but yeah, it's giving yourself that bit of fudge as well. And I think, your body's pretty good at telling you when it needs a rest. And when it tells you that, you need to listen to it too.
Yeah, 100%. I co-authored a book last year titled Value Creation Kid, The Healthy Struggles Your Children Need to Succeed. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm seeing in this country, with the best of intentions, parents are taking as much struggle as they possibly can away from the kids. And then by the time they become adults, they're not even close to ready to be an adult. So they need another emerging adult phase, maybe from 18 to 35, to figure out what it means to be an adult. And from what I remember reading, you started working, I believe, as 11 years old at a railway cafe. And at 13, you had a couple of jobs. I think it was dishwasher and telemarketing. Amazing at 13. You went through those struggles and it made you the amazing value creator you are today. So talk about that and why you think that's important.
Yeah, and I think it is a really difficult, before we go back there, as a mother now, who has got to this stage in life, my kids don't really want for anything if they were in that position, but we have to almost try and force them to want and force them to get part in it. I grew up in Scotland. My mum was a single mum, so she provided. We had a house and we had, a warm meal and clothes, but that was kind of it. If we wanted anything else, it was on us to get it. So I started working at 11, and I wasn't able to be paid because they didn't pay cash for an 11-year-old. So I would be paid in food, and it was a railway cafe, and they done things like ham and cheese croissants and things like that. So it was new food that I hadn't really tried. So I worked there for a while, but what the experience that I got from working there, the customer service, working with cash, all these things, it was able me to get the next job. So 12, I was working in a fish and chip shop, and then I was doing dishwashing, and then the telemarketing job came around when my older brother wanted to get a job, and he was too scared to actually call in for this job as telemarket. And I called in and the lady said, would you come and work with us? And it was cash in hand. So I said, yeah, like I'll do that. And then it was a commission job too. So I was able to make as much money as I wanted to make, really, and how hard I was willing to work. And I learned a lot about the sales process and everything that I was doing there. But it was around about this time that my mum started getting sick as well. So when she then had to take time off work and then eventually, unfortunately, she passed away, it became extra money to now money that's actually got to pay the bills. We had a younger brother too that we had to look after. So at 14, 15, I was then paying rent, paying bills, paying food, all from these little jobs. So we had to learn really fast in that period. But luckily, because I'd been working already, I knew how to work. I knew how to do these things. So yeah, by 15, I was full time. I had a full-time job, a part-time job, and I was earning enough to look after everyone. And that took me into I guess the world that I'm in now. But although that was a struggle, I kind of try not to go back and dwell on it, because it's done me no harm to where I am just now. The resilience that it built is always taking me through the various steps. And that's when I go to my own kids now and say, well, I need to build their resilience, but I don't want them to go through what I went through. So it's a hard balancing game. And I think I find it a lot with one of our companies is a security company, and we do advisory work for high net worth individuals. And although like I'm speaking from a impoverished area of growing up, the high net worth community suffer just as much in that way, where, they can get to first, second, third generation wealth and they don't have any resilience left, and it can all go in like seconds because there's nothing built there to be able to deal with the tough times.
Well, when we go to work for a company, we have some training usually before we come in, and then there's ongoing training, and we're cultivating and developing every team member to create more and more value for the company over time. And I think about value as there's material value, there's emotional energy, and there's spiritual value. The emotional energy is kind of how we show up, what we bring to the game. And to me, that's the X factor for leaders. The spiritual side is connected to something bigger. And so in the context of companies, it's how we feel about each other, our community, how connected we are across the board, the strength of that. And so, creating that, essentially across the board inside the organization. And I think that's a challenge in how we think about value creation within organizations. And so we're doing that. Why can't we do that with our kids? And if we want to have multi-generational wealth, there should be this training program. The most successful, wealthy families in history, everybody goes through a program along those lines. And in this book that I mentioned, there are things that we do for the kids. We call it 3 E's. The first one would be expectations. What's your job for the family? And as the children get older, their job changes. You don't get paid extra for this. This is your job. And then there's expenses. What are the expenses the children pick up more and more as they get older? And then third, how do they earn extra money so they can learn how to manage all that stuff? That's just in the house rules piece, but there's value creation, house rules, financial competency, and then healthy struggle. And the healthy struggle is, I believe, where parents, and we're seeing great results here, can design the struggles intentionally, make them healthy. Even unhealthy struggles can be leveraged, like you went through and I went through. I wouldn't trade it for anything on my side because it made me think about the world and create the value the way that I do. But how does that land on you and being able to just intentionally put children through a very loving, caring, but an intentional struggle program to be able to create value?
Yeah, I mean, we take them through everything that we're going through. I mean, obviously, don't know everything that we go through, but they're with us. When we're traveling and we're doing things that we're doing, they're with us and they're seeing everything, and they've got to take part in everything that we're doing. So, my son, he's 7. If we're in a hotel, he knows his responsibility is the security of the room. So he locks the door, he checks the lights, he does all these things before bedtime. Molly, my daughter, hers will be to make sure that everything's ship shape, and we make sure everything is, especially if you're in hotel rooms and there's 5 of you, everything has to have its place and be neat. So she has to organize that and keep that in control. We've got the 1-year-old, so they both have to take part in looking after them. So they understand that they have that value within the group, that it isn't mum and dad running around doing absolutely everything. Even if they go out for dinner, they have to ask for the bill themselves, or they have to order their own food. I'm not ordering your food for you. You have to do that by yourself. And yeah, again, in the actual household, it's everything is got a value. So if you help with the dishes, or with the clothes, or with helping with the baby, or wash the car, or unpack the groceries, any of these things come with a price, and that's how you can build up your allowance at the end of the week. But if you don't do any of it, you can't get any of that. So but we also do, financial incentives, so they can learn things. If they can learn, they work with like taxes, or they help mum with, if we get a book order in and they have to post it out for me, and they know that that's worth something too. So definitely nothing is given in this household, for sure. But then we like to get them involved in a lot of the give back stuff that we do. Even just if we give a homeless person some money in the street, or give them a meal, we stop and we speak to that person, and we find out how they got to where they are. And the kids get involved in the conversation, and they get to see the way that people are, and how they got there, and what we can do to help. So it's just keeping that circle going of knowing your value within the house, giving back, keeping that all within one circle.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I find that a lot of parents don't really work backwards from what would be the qualities or characteristics of our children as they launch into adulthood. Do we want them thinking critically, being self-reliant, financially competent? We want them to be value creators in the world, value family, community, strengthen those kinds of things. And what I notice in organizations, and I want to get into nonprofits because I've worked with a lot of them over the last number of years, adults have a hard time connecting dots. And so I find that children, we can do all these things, but they don't connect the dots. And so then they go to school and they learn, hey, get a good grade, get a diploma, get a degree, get a job. And I feel like they're doing what they think they're supposed to do in those environments, instead of discovering what they're meant to do to really create value in the world, i.e., what are their value creation superpowers, and how do they leverage that? And so a lot of parents not only don't they kind of work backwards from that, but they really struggle with watching their kids struggle. Why do you think they struggle so much watching their kids struggle at all?
As a mom, and I'm sure you can sympathize, but you don't want to see them in pain. You don't want to see them hurt, and you don't want, if somebody's bullying your child, you immediately want to go and take that child who's hurting them and tell them, no, don't do that. But you have to let them. I remember my mum, there was a particular girl who wasn't very nice to me in school, and she wanted to have a fight with me after school. And I was so scared. I was like, I don't want to fight. That's not me. I don't want to do that. And my mum said, you have to go to school and you have to deal with this. And I was absolutely, Mum, could you please come with me? And she was like, no, you're going. And I remember coming out of the school that day, so terrified about what was about to happen. I didn't want to have this fight. And I remember looking across the street, and my mum was there, but she hadn't come across. She was just there, and I knew she was present, and I knew I could deal with it. And I actually done what I always do now, which is I talked my way out of that conflict. I used my words, and we got to it, and we luckily never had to actually get into any physical altercation. But just knowing that she was there gave me that little bit of strength. And I guess over the years, I've always had that in my mind, that she wasn't there, but she was with me in some sort of way. And I want the kids to know that, and have as much of that strength inside them that they can deal with it themselves, because you're obviously not always going to be there. But yeah, it's really hard to not deal with your child's conflict for them. And at what age do you stop and say, well, no, you've got to do it yourself now? I think it's a really tough one, and I don't always get it right, but I like to give them that opportunity to at least deal with it for themselves. And I think even like some of the things they have to deal with in school now, that they've got social media, which is something that I didn't have growing up. And, where we used to be able to just come home and shut the door, they've still got it on a constant basis. So how do you deal with somebody who's being mean online or sending messages? And I want to say exactly what I would say back, but it's like, let's talk about it and see how you can get past that conflict that you've got going on. And I think that that is really hard as well, because you don't know it. I didn't grow up like that. I don't know what it's like to feel that constantly being on and not being able to just get away from it. And then to say, like, a lot of people would say, well, you take their devices away from them, you get, but I don't think that helps. I think they need to be able to work it out on their own and work past that. So yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, I always think about it. If we can do things that will increase internal fulfillment and intrinsic motivation, then the kids are a lot more resilient when it comes to these external things that are going on. But if the motivation is all external and they want approval from everybody, and that is a pretty fragile place to be for our kids.
And I think they have a lot of pressure, especially in school now. It is like, get these grades, do these things. And it's like, well, what is it that you want? Do you want to become a doctor, a lawyer? Do you need to go to university? Is there something else? Do you want to be a musician? Do you want to be an artist in some way? Is there something else that is, I've got 3 kids they're all very, very different. And I already know they're going to do very, very different things. So if I was to push them all down one direction, that would be giving someone a disservice along the way. I've got to see, right, okay, he's good at sports and he really enjoys working with animals and he really enjoys being in the water. Let's do some more things with her, where she's doing other things that are more to her path. But I can only guide them along that way. And I can't, there's so much going on now and various different things, and they don't understand. One, for example, would be that Molly got home from school and she had this list of pronouns that they'd given her to memorize, and she didn't understand why she was getting that. And the option there is I can give my feelings, or I could say what one way says or what another way says, or I could just let her work out herself as to why this is being given to her and what the situation is. And you can see both sides of the story, and however you want to feel about this, you can feel about it. But you have to build your own opinion and not be told where to go and how to go about it, but learn what it's about. If you're being handed the Bible, don't be saying this is terrible. Learn about the Bible. If you're being handed the Quran, don't be saying it's terrible. Learn about what it is and form your own thinking around it, rather than being told what to think or told what to say or told what you're meant to believe. So that's the way we try and do it in the house. And I'm learning. I'm always learning from what she's telling me or what Tommy's telling me. Like, the kids are always giving me new lessons every day, and having that open mind is massive.
I love that. Yeah, my filter is, will this create value? Yes or no. And if it doesn't, then it's probably not something worthwhile to pursue or encourage. And I think the purpose of an education really is to create value in the world, but we're not really telling the kids that. So it's hard for them to discover their value creation superpowers as they go through. And the nonprofits that I've been involved with for the last number of years are mostly around improving conditions for K-12 students to learn, better schools. But the whole purpose of an education, so they can over time guide what they learn to create the value they want when they launch into adulthood. And one of the things I found interesting about nonprofits is very few of them actually have the impact they state that they do. And I'm actually going to go back and read it again, but reading through your book, How to Ask for Money, anybody that's working for a nonprofit should read your book. And anybody affiliated with a nonprofit should read your book. It's just a no BS. This is what works. This is how to think about it in a value creating way. But why do you think so many of them completely miss the mark? Because in my experiences, they seem to be in existence to make payroll for the people that work there, but not actually have the measurable impact that they're claiming to have.
Yeah, I think most nonprofits do start off with the right, I'm hoping that most nonprofits do start off with the right objective, that there'll be something it'll be something that's close to the family, or something's happened that cause is really important to them, and then they'll maybe get a board involved, and then it'll maybe grow from there, and then they'll have to employ people and pay people, and then the money is starting to come in. I feel like the root is always about the cause, but then it spreads, and the bigger it becomes this business, the more it's spreading, and the more the actual initial cause starts to disappear. And we're getting, there's a huge organization that works with veterans in the UK, And what they started for and their purpose was amazing. And then it just spread so much that it became almost like a merchandise place that people just wanted to go and buy shirts and do things. And when you was really going down to what is it you're actually doing to help veterans, it was very difficult to see what it was. And I think that there's a public distrust sometimes in what the nonprofits are doing, especially when you see really high salaries and maybe not so much results that are happening, and you're just seeing that, you know, these big things being spoken about but nothing actually being done. That it does cause a bit of distrust. And I think that we could do with going back to just really getting into like how you can run a nonprofit properly, how you can show that it's actually benefiting the people that you're saying it's benefiting. But I'm absolutely not saying that people should work for free for a nonprofit. If you want the right people running them, then you need to pay the money to get those people that are good at it. But you know, paying the founder's brother and auntie and mother a salary for doing nothing, that's when you can start drawing lines on these things. But yeah, a nonprofit, really, how people can select a nonprofit on who they want to support is really about reading that financial statement, seeing what the work they're doing, seeing the impact, because any nonprofit that I've ever worked with that is impactful will have that fully transparent on their annual report, and straight on the front of their website. It'll be all over there. So I always, when people are asking me who should I support, that's the type of thing I'm looking for, is show me their annual return and show me how transparent everything is.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think the majority of nonprofits start with the right idea. Like, it's a really good idea. They want to go for it. Very, very few start with nefarious intent. And there are those out there too. There are those people in the world that we need to somehow get rid of their activities. But I think also, you know, one, as they get bigger, there's creep. And I've watched that too. We'll start working with a nonprofit. They've never raised more than $2 million in a year. They've kind of sleepy nonprofit, been around, 10, 12 years. And all of a sudden they're raising 20 million and it's climbing. And then all of a sudden the board's paying attention. Everybody's jockeying politically for access to all that stuff. But I also think there's a big part that says they just don't know how to capitalize on the idea. Like, how do we, I've got this idea, but I don't know how to scale it or grow it or do any of that. So it's probably a bit of both. What do you think there?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you can get somebody who's got a really powerful cause, probably 9 out of 10 times that person isn't, a businessman. That isn't their thing. They've just got this cause that they're really passionate about. And it's at that point, there needs to be somebody there who can, okay, you've got the cause, you've got the passion, I've got the business acumen, let's pull it together and make this happen. There's so many ways that a nonprofit can make money, through grants, through donations, monthly donors, corporate donations, sales. And I would say most nonprofits don't hit every single one of them. They maybe focus on, they've got a huge amount of grants, but very little donors coming in, or they've got really big corporate donations, but very little grant work. They'll focus into one area. And that's really what I try and do as a consultant in fundraising. I'll go in and look at where it is that they're bringing the money in and just expand on all the other areas, see where they're light on, see where they can get better at. There might be areas they're doing really well. And then just take each of those areas and just build them up and really work with their development director to get into every single area rather than just focusing on the one and just taking it as a business. I think that's really important to see that fundraising in itself is a business, and that we look at, when we're asking for money, we have to take that as though you were going in and asking for investment in your company. It has to be dealt with in the same way. So, so much things that nonprofits and business have in common. And I think often it's thought that they're completely separate, where really we need to pull them together.
Yeah, it makes sense. And when I work with development teams, I go in and they have a list of potential donors or targets, if you will, and they take a guess at what they think their net worth is. And then they have a calculation for their, sort of giving threshold or potential. And so now go get that money. And I said, well, wait a minute, don't we have to connect them with what we're doing? And you talked about that in your book. We want them involved all the way through, fully connected, and build that. But so many of the nonprofits, they got the check, and then the next year comes around, they go ask for another check. Talk through that a little bit. That's a pretty big miss from a lot of.
Yeah. Your donor engagement should be like priority number one in what you're doing. The donors that I've dealt with that have been disheartened by these types of things, they'll get the call, can you donate? Can you give a gift? Can you do any of these things? They do it. And I've seen ones where they've given it and nothing. There's not a thank you letter. There's not a phone call. There's not an email. There's absolutely nothing. And then a year later to the dot, they'll call them again. And sometimes they might get lucky and get it again. But, most of the time it's like absolutely not, unless that person, and usually that person really does believe in the cause, but there's only so much you can take advantage of someone. Especially when they believe, because, you see a lot of people will, let's look at the top companies or the top rich list, and we'll just target them and think, well, you've got the money, so you should give it to us. And it's that, well, no, this person earned this money and has worked hard for this money and has done sleepless nights and has done the sacrifice. And you're coming in saying that you're kind of entitled to it because you're in a cause that they might believe in. It's such the wrong way to go with it. And I talk about it that, we need to be, using that gratitude, informing them, keeping them engaged, working on, because everything that you're doing with them, not just them, they're going to be telling other people, this is the cause you want to work with, this is who you want to be working with, they're amazing, they do everything, they do all this stuff. And the more they know, the more they're able to tell people. And it shows that you're transparent as well. If you're able to keep all that engagement up with your donors, then they'll love you for it, and they'll give back because they'll feel like they're part of it, they're helping and they're making this difference. And I think really being able to show down to like small, for every dollar that you've given, you've helped X and you've helped Y. Really being able to show them that and give them that feedback is huge for a donor. They want to know that they're contributing in some way, and the more that you can get them. And don't get me wrong, some people want complete anonymous and everything that they're doing. You can still give them the information without, giving too much away. So much ways to do it, but I would say that if you're just taking that check and never speaking to your donor, you're going to lose that donor for sure.
Yeah. Well, in your book, How to Ask for Money, you lay it out really clearly. And again, I think anybody involved in nonprofits should absolutely read it. But they do miss that. And it's, is it just too hard of work out of the gate to pull all that together? Because I can tell when I get approached for money, and I get approached daily. There's one nonprofit that I've been working with for about 3.5 years, and I just stepped off the board, but I got involved. I joined the board. I've personally given them, I think, over $1 million. And I wanted to control and see what was going on to a large degree to make sure we were having the impact for K-12 students in Arizona that I wanted to see happening. Now I'm shifting all that to get into as many families as possible to start the value creation journey before they even get to kindergarten. So I want to have the impact, and I'm leaning in, and so many will approach me with, look at this great work we're doing, and did zero research or thinking about what's important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my other work, so my nonprofit work, but we have a security company, and a big part of my job is due diligence. I do investigation work for people that need to find out information about people. And I take that same work and put it into the nonprofit. So before I'm even knocking on your door to ask you for a check, I'm knowing your kids' names. I'm knowing, where you grew up. I'm knowing what your favorite sport is. I've known so much about you that I'm able to relate that. It's the same, if you're doing a job interview and you're handing that CV in, just a generic CV that you've handed to 20 other people, then you kind of playing potluck there. If you take that job interview, look at the job description and take all the wording out of that description and put it into your CV, then you've got a much bigger chance of getting that job. That's the same thing as personalizing each step of the way and not just taking every donor. I mean, yeah, there is those campaigns that you want to send out 100 emails and just see who bites, but just to take that little bit of extra time and personalize it and make it about that person, something that they'll wake up and go, well, they know me and they want me to be part of what they're doing. That really just gives that, we like to feel that connection as humans.
Yeah, where do you even start? So if you're going to be really intentional about building a donor base of folks that would likely be very interested in the impact we want to have on the world, improving something, where do you start developing that? And then how do you grow that and build a community in a more intentional way?
I mean, we've got so much tools now. I wouldn't have liked to have been doing this in the 80s, but, Google's an amazing tool. You start with the cause and you look for kind of your 5 main pillars of what it is that you're doing, whatever the cause might be. Look at the pillars of what it is you're doing, and then really research and who is in that space, what companies are working with that, what their CSR, their corporate social responsibilities are. If you're working in mental health, what companies are really interested in that space at the moment and are looking into it. And really trying to pair up your pillars and your mission with those companies. Looking at, you can usually find whatever the space is, you'll usually be able to find it on a Google search, people that are specifically involved in it. And you can list them out, whether it be corporates, whether it be individuals, whether it be celebrities. And then you can usually find the people that are working with those people. And you really want to go and try and get into the actual person who's in charge of the giving side of it and who's in charge of the marketing or the branding, and really get them involved. And then when you get to the pitch level, you've got all this information already there. You've seen that most companies do have their missions and their CSRs and things on there for you to see. And you can usually dig down into interviews that they've done and things that they've said. And some companies change year by year. So it's worth keeping a note of where they've been looking at. Well, they were looking at childhood development there. So maybe they might be interested in children's mental health now. You can look through the different years that they've been working, and you can usually get a sense. And yeah, it is a full-time job for someone. And I do think it's one of the most important roles in a nonprofit to have a full-time development team there, at least one member of them who's just fully dedicated to research and donor development.
And all the pieces have to tie together. So you can raise a bunch of money, but you don't have the ROI on the investment, then it's all going to come crumbling down.
Yeah. I've seen them where they do these huge fundraisers and they'll spend 500 grand to raise 750 grand. You think, okay, was that worth it? You got that extra bit, but all the work that went into that, all the time that went into it, could you have been doing other things? What your spend is really needs to reflect what you're going to be taking in at the end of it.
Yeah. Well, didn't you say in the book that having a gala fundraising event's the most amazing experience ever, and every development person loves to do that?
Yeah, I literally had a call with a nonprofit earlier today, and they were like, "We want to do a gala event." I'm like, okay, let's do it, but let's get planning. No, but we want to do it in April. Okay, no. We need a year. We need some good planning time. We want to raise some money, so. Everything's different. Some people love to do just like one huge impactful event that's going to change the whole of the year for them. Some people attack the grants and really go for the grant programs. It really depends what the cause is and how we're working it. But research is everything. Like really knowing what you're doing, not going in blind. And I think in the book, I talk a lot about how to prep, are you going to go in fully caffeined up after a night out from the night before and not eating properly? Are you going to prepare your mind? Are you going to prepare your body? All these things. I think in the book, I go to the complete extreme of how to make it perfect. But even if you were to just take little bits of each of it, it still is important to do as much as you can.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way in the book you talk about meditation, eating, just everything. And to me, that goes to emotional energy. When we're operating a 9 or 10 on a scale from 1 to 10, we can do anything no matter what's going on. 1 or 2, the smallest thing goes sideways and it ruins our week. So I think that's so important that you actually cover in the book. And one of the things that, I thought it's obvious, but also really profound, and a lot of people don't think about it, is fear holds us back for sure. And you talk about switching the fear, going through. And I've literally taken pages of notes here so we could talk for a week about all this stuff. But, fear of failing. So you talk about failure to fortune, and then you've got the fear of, the embarrassment, anticipation, regret, and switching those things. Talk about that a little bit. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, I think I'd done a lot of studying on fear while I was writing that section of the book. And because I think from my point of view, my mum was 37 when she died. So I've always lived a bit fearlessly. I've lived going every minute could be your last. So you've just got to go for it. But I know a lot of people do live in that kind of fear bubble and they're a bit scared of bursting out of it. But I always say okay, well, would the regret of never doing it outweigh the regret of of doing it. Like, what would be worse, to feel that embarrassment, or the feeling of excitement when you achieve what you want to achieve? And, is the fear of failure more powerful than the fortune that you can grow from it? So I wanted to try and flip each one and make fear a bit more of an exciting thing for people. And okay, we've got the fear. That's awesome. That means that we're actually going somewhere. Like, we're not stuck in this comfort zone. The comfort zone is great. You feel nice and calm there, but it's not doing anything. It's not growing anything. So we need to push yourself into that fear element and flip how, probably from the book, you can see that I like my acronyms. So, it's easy to remember. So I took each one of them and just said, look, how can we make this a less of a scary thing, and make fear, kids love fear. We sometimes pay to be scared, but it's about bringing that fear of the unknown real for us, really.
Yeah. And anticipation. So making assumptions, maybe you didn't know your research and you're making these things up, but you can do it in a healthy way or a super unhealthy way. But when you say and change the fear of anticipation to appreciation, walk through that a little bit, just so our listeners can understand it.
So my husband actually came up with a saying. I think he's UK Special Forces, and his saying is anticipation's worse than participation. So jump in. That's the way he says it. And I think that we can really psych ourselves out of anything by the fear and the anticipation of what's about to happen. But if we can skip past that part and just really appreciate what we will get at the end of it, and what is possible at the end of this, taking away that anticipation brings us straight into the appreciation of what we can get. So it is a case of, and it's fully right in what he says, like, just jump in and just do it, because we can really, like, we were about to do a bungee jump, and the longer we're stood there, the worse it's getting. And, you've just got to jump, you've just got to go for it, because really there's never any good from standing and waiting. So yeah, take away the anticipation and make it, and appreciate what you're going to get.
Yeah. If you're thinking about it and you're going to eventually do it, just do it sooner, probably, rather than later. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's with most scary things, is you don't think about it too much, just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've started now 7 businesses from scratch, and a couple of them, had I known what it was going to be like, I never would have probably done it. And I'm so glad that I did it, because they all worked out well. I've actually had exits from a few $1 million to well into 9 figures, and I'm starting another business in another quarter. And I love this. And I want to get to this no backup comment that you talk about in the book, not, never having a backup as you were growing up. I started my journey at 7 years old. A neighbor asked me, not a friend, not a family member, would you pull weeds in the garden for 25 cents an hour? I'm like, sure. Well, back then, you can buy 2 candy bars and get change. And then that went to shoveling snow and paper routes and dishwasher, busboy, cook. And in the 1980s, I played over 1,000 nights on stages playing music. And I made most of my money. I don't count that as a business, but it was a business. In the beginning of my senior year in high school, I didn't have the best home environment. Dysfunctional, I think, can be normal, but this was toxic and dangerous to a large degree. Never felt like a victim, all that. But I came home early my senior year in high school, and my clothes were in paper bags on the front porch, and the locks were changed. And so I spent a night in my truck, and then the next night I found somebody that needed a roommate. It was a non-event for me to have, be able to afford the apartment, because I was already financially competent and independent. But I never had backup, and I became the person that most leaned on to help them over time. And I love doing that. It's quite a lesson figuring out how to help in a good way and not help in an enabling way of bad behaviors. So, I think we work through that. But I didn't have the backup, and boy, did it make me strong. And I don't regret all those things, healthy and unhealthy struggles as a kid, because it made me who I am. You talk about not having backup and you depend on yourself first all the way through. Talk through that a bit, because I think that's really, really powerful. And for me, it completely changed my perspective. I had no choice. It affected decision-making and everything that I did.
Yeah, I think I always say the buck stops with me, and it's because of that way of growing up, especially, when I had my mom, it was, she was working and she was sick for a long time. So there wasn't really anybody there that was able to to be there for us. And as I've grown up and even having the kids, I think I've always looked after everyone around me. That's always just been the way it is. But knowing that I don't have that fallback or that fall guy or a rich parent who's going to bail me out or any of these things, it's, you know, that you've got to keep going. And when your choices, you know, I think I talk about the fear, and I say that I want to install this into the kids, that if you've had that choice between, do I eat today or do I have electricity? Like, I can skip another meal, but I haven't eaten for a few days now, so maybe I need to be eating now and we could just be a bit colder, you know, having those kind of things. You know, you never want to go back there. So you know that the only person that you're relying on is yourself. And yes, of course, I've married now and I've got a husband and we can be there for each other. But even he would probably say, I'm still the one, he'll say, okay, Alana, how do we solve this? And I have no issue with that because it's always been the way that it is. So to have that formed from a really young age, when it comes to business, when it comes to anything we're doing, when it comes to challenges, adventures, anything that we're doing, there's nothing that is too much for me. And I feel like when it does get too much for me, I just take that little step back and I know that I've got 24 hours that I play with and say, okay, if I can't deal with it right at this minute, just take a breath, meditate, whatever it might be, you're going to be able to come through it because you've come through 10 times worse. So this is fine. We can deal with this. So I think that's led me into always having that personality where I'll if there's a problem, I'll always feel like I'm going to be the one that's going to solve it. And it doesn't matter how big it might be. I know that when the incident happened in October in Israel, it wasn't even a thought that Dean was going to go and that we were going to help. Dean flew over Israel within like 24 hours because I knew that there wasn't a lot of people who were going to be able to do that in that time scale with that mindset. So we were going to be those ones. And it's not in that kind of hero complex. We're going to like go and we're going to save the day. It's just that we know that we've got these capabilities, and Dean was brought up very similar to me and has that resilience built into him. And it's always been like, we can do it. And we've already got that grounding from knowing that the buck is stopping right here and we're the ones who's going to do it.
Yeah. And that's what I'm getting from you. It's not about, hey, I'm a hero. It's not about virtue signaling. But it is about being self-reliant, being confident, that sort of intrinsic, drive that we have. I think it helps. And I've spoken to thousands of high school kids about the virtues of entrepreneurship. Anybody that creates a job, to me, is a hero of mine because it's one more person that can help support their families. And one of the questions I ask is, do you feel better about yourself when you can fully rely on yourself, financially and otherwise to support yourself, survive emergencies, help family and friends and causes? Or if you're dependent on, I can't even finish the sentence, and all the hands are like, no, self-reliant. We all want to be that. But culturally in this country, it feels like we're saying, if a kid struggles at all, then it's our fault and they're going to go down.
Yeah.
And we need to change that. I want to change this to a value creation culture in the country and make, creating value is really cool. And not the other side of it, because I think, there's a large group of folks that create value in the world, real measurable value. To me, that's practicing virtue. And at the same time, they push back on things that are taking value out of the world. But then there's a lot of folks that, when they take value out of the world, they're just doing it, rigging the system in some way. So how do we get back to, it's a big question, but how do we get back to, creating value is really where we should be, not figuring out the most creative way to rig the game. And we see a lot of that going on at all levels right now.
Yeah, I think being in America, the one thing that is different, I guess, from the UK is that there is a big litigation, I almost would say issue here, that there is a blame game that's played a bit. And if we're not able to take responsibility for ourselves and say sorry and, my fault, let's fix it, let's solve this problem. If we're all constantly worried that we don't want to receive the blame, then we're not going to be able to fix the problems that are being made. And even when it comes to the kids, I can see that the kids sometimes do stuff that isn't appropriate or isn't right, and I can sometimes try and talk to other parents and say, look, we need to address this with the kids. And I'll just be like, no, they didn't do anything wrong. They're good kids. No, they have done something wrong. And that's okay. We just need to teach them that they've done it wrong. they need to take responsibility, learn what they can do differently next time, and then move on from there. But if we're constantly trying to stop them from being blamed, or it's not my fault, or it was him, it wasn't me, or this kind of attitude, and instead of saying, actually, yeah, that was me, let's fix this, let's get to the root of this. But I don't know if it's that fear of being sued, or if it's just the way that we're worried about that. I don't know what the reason is, but I think if we could address that blame, fault, responsibility issue, there might be a slight shift in how we're taking that, because it might make us look to other people rather than looking to blame other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's super insightful. And I think this goes into the camp of protecting kids from struggle. And so protect them from everything, and then go off to college and be an adult, and they have no idea, like we talked about earlier, how to really be that. Now they're figuring it out largely without our help, out in the real world. Right now, I believe, young folks that are going into the workplace, if they just act like they want to work, they have a huge advantage, because so many don't even act like they want to work. They just want to get paid and don't want to be bothered with anything. And I've always thought it was interesting where we have our businesses, right? And we pay exactly what we agreed to pay 100% of the time. Why is it okay for employees to give us 30, 40, 60% of what they agreed to do for that money? It doesn't make sense. And they would have the same standard if somebody was painting their house and they painted it the wrong color and the paint was peeling off. They wouldn't want to pay for it. But it's wild how we've gotten this gap that keeps growing about what employers have to do. So this exchange of value needs to be equitable across the board. One of the stories, and many of them in your book, that stuck out with me, because it's how I would run at it as well. I believe you were a debt collector. When people had issues, you went to their homes. You're like, well, how can I help you? What's your monthly or weekly spend? Let's put a budget together and go through it. And then your comment was, this might have been from one of the interviews, we got paid first because we were working with them over everybody else. So here you are. This is your attitude. It's about the end result out there, and it's creating real value for the customer in a difficult situation. And then you get promoted to run a bank branch. I mean, it's talk about it's that end result, create value, not just get money thing that's going on today in a lot of our youth. So talk through that. Where'd you put that?
I'd gone from, so the debt collection, I'd worked in telemarketing, and then from the telemarketing, there was more money to be made knocking doors and selling products. So I went on to doing that. It was a male-heavy environment at that time, because a lot of women don't want to go knocking on doors in the middle of Scotland in the middle of winter. So when I got the debt collecting job, it was about knocking doors, and I've never had a problem with asking for money. So to get that job was quite simple for me. But it was in the late 90s, early 90s, where it was very male dominated, the debt collecting world, and it could be very aggressive, and they were basically making their money by scaring the clients into paying them. And that was never going to be me. I was never going to be able to scare MD to pay me. So I took the approach, well, look, let's just have a look. My mum was also in debt, and she would have that guys knocking on the door, and we would be hiding down under the windowsill so you didn't see we were there. And I didn't want that fear for someone else. So we would just sit down and we would say, look, how did you get into this position? What's going on? And, 9 out of 10 times there was a story there. I had a lady whose husband had died of cancer, and he hadn't got the life insurance. So she lost her house, and she lost all these various things along with losing her husband. And then she had all this debt to pay. So we really had to say, look, how much money have you got? Let's look at the budget. Let's look at the plan. Are you paying for things you don't need to be paying for? Like, can we clear some of these things up? And because every week I'd be doing that with them and sitting down and just talking to them, they would always pay me first. And then it became that I became the number one debt collector in Scotland. And then when this position for bank manager came up, because it was already in finance, I applied for that. Highly underqualified as well. They wanted bachelor's degrees. They wanted all these other things that I absolutely didn't have, but I went for the job anyway. Great interview and got given the job. And this was just before the 2008 financial crash happened. So I'm going into this bank knowing very, very little about banking, really. I mean, I knew finance and I knew bits, but I didn't know bonds. I didn't know stocks and shares and all these various different things. And then I go in, and then there's this huge crash that happens, and again, I'm having to do the same thing that I was doing in debt collecting, but just on a different scale where people are losing like hundreds of thousands and millions of pounds and dollars. And I'm having to work through this process with them. And the more people were actually withdrawing, the worse it was getting. So we were having to try and stop that situation happening again with something that I was learning about. So I just had to put everything that I'd already practiced before into place in that environment. And I think that's why I've always said that I don't think there's an environment I couldn't really work in, because it's all just that problem solving, working things out for people that you're doing in each thing, really.
Yeah, and those opportunities are available to every young adult going into the workplace, right? If they apply themselves, solve problems, create real value. And again, I think that would be a giant competitive advantage today.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people do look at the job description and say, I'm not ticking that box and that box and that box. I'm not going to apply for it. And I think from statistically, I believe that women are very terrible at that. If they're not ticking every single box, they're not applying for the job. And I've always said, just, go for it. What's the worst? Again, back to the fear thing. What's the worst that can happen? Even if they say no, you're going to learn something from that interview and you're going to grow from that interview. So go in and give it a try anyway, because a lot of these things are, I didn't have any bachelor's degrees and I've got fairly far. So
you really have. I have a lot of younger folks ask me about resume writing and said, well, and if you're going to go on an interview, make it all about the value you're going to create. If you're hiring me to work in your organization in this role, what are the couple of measurable outcomes that you want me to achieve so we know that we won going forward? And all of them are finding that when they use that language, they're treated like unicorns and they're being scurried in the door as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think that goes for when people are asking for a pay rise too. Often I've heard they go in and be like, well, I've been here for this long, or this person's getting this amount of money and I deserve this and I should get this. And I'm like, what benefit is that to the organization? That's just complaining. It's just, virtue signaling. What benefit are you giving? Like, what have you done? What is it that you're doing to grow? I spoke to the chief executive of a well-known magazine recently, and she was nervous about asking for this pay rise because the company had been taken over and she'd been promised a pay rise from one company and she wasn't sure how she was going to ask. And I said, has anything changed? Are you still providing the value to that company? Are you still helping the company grow? Are you, all the things that you were going to get it for originally, are you still doing those things? So yes, then don't be nervous to go in and ask that person, even though you don't know this new person, go in and ask them the same thing, but don't demand in the way of, they said I could get it, so you should say I should get it. Do it in the same way of, this is what I'm worth, this is what my value is. And it's something that I often teach to veterans as well, because they're the worst at understanding their value, really terrible at understanding what they actually bring to a workplace. Like you were saying, a veteran doesn't really care about clocking out on 9 to 5 or making sure that they're within those tight timelines, or they want to problem solve, they want to exceed expectations, they want to get to the roots of things. So the list of benefits, their organizational skills, their problem solving skills, all the things that a veteran has that they don't understand, once you can get that into their resume and get them to understand those things, it's a lot easier for them to sell themselves.
Yeah, the work ethic and all of that is just incredible with the veterans. We need to do more to help get them into the workforce, those that are struggling with it. But you're right, to your point, if we're applying for a job or we're asking for a raise, let's make it all about the value being created. Don't show up and if you want to make it really short and sweet, don't show up and say, I'm here for my entitlement.
Yeah.
Just because, we don't want that. It should be all about creating value. Alana, if people want to learn more about you, how can they discover that?
My website's alanastott.com and the usual Instagrams, etc. All the usual places. But yeah, alanastott.com's got everything that you need to know.
Okay. Thank you. Really enjoyed the first book, and I've already purchased the second book, She Who Dares. I can't wait to read your memoirs there. That's going to be something I think pretty cool with all the stories that you have. Thank you for writing it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've also got the kids' books as well. So if you want me to send you some of them, let me know. They've got some good stories in them too.
Yeah, I'll actually go to the website and order them wherever I can find them, because I'm really interested in this right now with families. And We're currently, with this book that I mentioned, Value Creation Kid, we're in about 3,000 families. And the goal of my co-author and I is to have this method in at least 2 million families within 5 years. So we're going for it on this.
That's amazing. Well, the 3 books have come. The first one is Live Your Own Way, and it's really just about finding your own path and not letting other people tell you what to do. And Me, My Friends Play is really about bringing different cultures together and seeing how everyone, it's basically the top 5 immigrations to America and showing each of their cultures. But the last one's my favorite, is Who to Help Today. And it really is about showing even how a child can go through every single day seeing opportunities to help people, and that's what the book walks through with that. So it is quite exciting. But I do definitely donate the books to nonprofits as well. So if there is anybody that needs help in that area, I definitely will.
Okay, well, I'll order a stack of each, and I do a lot of fundraising events here at my home music studio, and I'll just have them out, and then let's get this out in the world. We're on the same mission, and so I love that when it comes to kids. Thank you. And Alana, thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time. And thank you. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. And if you got some value out of today's episode, please like the episode and leave a review. And until next time, show your value to the world.